Hello everybody, this is a new style of video. It's going to be quite casual. So it's almost going to work like a podcast. Basically, I've had this idea of I play a lot of games every month and I don't really get to talk about a lot of them because, you know, a review could take a while to make. So there's a few games that I just never speak about. So this is basically going to be, I don't know, half an hour to an hour of me sitting down and just talking about games that I've played in July of 2022. So, I will put gameplay, I think, over these, and I'm probably going to stumble over my words. This is going to be extremely casual. But this is best to just use a podcast, listen to it in the background. Like, you don't need to sit here and watch this. It's probably just going to be me twirling my mustache and talking about games or something. This is very strange because I'm looking at myself, but it's kind of delayed a bit. But that's a bit too much of an intro. So we'll start off with the game that I played first this month, which, when I got COVID, I played Mafia, which I already did a video on, so I won't spend too much time talking about it. But Mafia was actually really good. I think it had a few things that kind of stood out to me. I thought it was going to be like a GTA game, but it ended up being more like Uncharted, which I personally liked because I'm not really that big a fan of GTA. So that worked out in my favor. They still had like an open world though, and the open world was absolutely, like, it was empty. It looked beautiful. It looked really realistic, but it was just ultimately extremely empty. So I didn't explore it whatsoever. It was basically just, once you started a mission, drive from this point to this point. You got to see it, but there was nothing to do. So in that sense, I do wish it was more like Uncharted, where they realized that they actually had a really good narrative. And with that really good narrative, they could have just made, say, 2 or 3 more missions over creating a big open world, because the missions themselves are really fun and the characters are fun, and the story in general is like, it's a traditional mob story, but it's a setting that I think everybody wants to play in. So they did a really good job at making it kind of feel realistic. I wasn't around in like 1930s, I think it was 1930s America, but it felt like it was authentic. Now, the gameplay itself, like, the driving was fine, the gunplay was fine, so there's not really much to talk about there. But I think if you're looking for like a narrative style, you know, Uncharted-like game where you just treat it as play the main missions, then it's really good. Like, I'd probably put it on par with Uncharted 1. Now, that isn't saying much. I know back in the day Uncharted 1 was really impressive, but now it doesn't hold up as well. I have my little espresso mug here. I should have actually used my PlayStation espresso mug. That would have made a lot more sense. But yeah, Mafia 1, I would definitely recommend it to everybody. It's in, well, to anybody that likes that sort of narrative game, because it's in PlayStation Plus PlayStation Plus Premium. So I think, well, it's free for most people who have it. So, and then they have number 2 and 3, which I will eventually make videos on. I do have a longer video talking about Mafia, so that's why I don't want to spend too much time, because it would be a bit boring if you've already watched the video, which you should have. Please watch the video. It has 130 views, which I'm pretty happy with. But yeah, Mafia 1, definitely recommend it. Now, in the background, in pretty much every single month, I will always be playing Rocket League. So I've been playing Rocket League. Apologies, I have had some, this is, yeah, I don't know why, but I noticed I've had some reaction to some sun cream or something, so my eye is a bit dry and itchy, so I might be scratching it. So just ignore that. I actually look like I've been crying or something. But I'm always going to be playing Rocket League. You know, 1,500 hours in it. I love Rocket League. Great game. Brilliant. Love it. There we go. That's all I have to say about Rocket League. But then after that, we have the biggest game I've played this month. And that was Live Alive, which I reviewed for Game Explain. And I did get a code from Nintendo, so free game, advertisement, whatever, some shite that I have to put in here. But Live Alive was surprising. I think I was definitely on the fringes. One of my favorite things about reviewing, like ever since I've started reviewing games for Game Explain that I'm getting early, my favorite thing about it is that when I review a game, I don't have anything influencing my opinion. Like, obviously, as someone who reviews games, I like to keep my opinion as unsullied as possible, but, you know, I do listen to other YouTubers and I do listen to podcasts. So that would, like, certainly influence my opinions on games, because you're hearing things and then you're thinking, oh yeah, I probably agree with that. So then that will kind of start coming into my mind, whereas I didn't come up with that thought myself, even though even though I do agree, and I'm certainly not like, oh, he said this, so then I must believe that, it's still not 100% my thought. Like, even though I agree with it, I didn't come up with it myself. So that can influence when I'm making reviews on games that I've already heard people talk about. So the best thing about this is that I don't know anything. I don't know any other reviewers, so I don't speak to people who get games early. So I'm just playing the game, formulating my opinion. And I was on the fringes with this game completely. I wasn't wrong. Obviously, it's an opinion. You can't be wrong on an opinion. But like, you could probably hear Arlo jingling around in the background there. But Live Alive is a good game, but I don't think it's anything more than a good game. So to break it down, there's 7 stories. Well, there's actually 8, but there's 7 characters that you choose from, each set in different periods of time, and like some's like the distant future, the near future, prehistoric, like the twilight of Edo Japan, which is like old-timey Japan, and then Imperial China and stuff. So there's loads of variety there, but I think ultimately they just end up feeling like short stories rather than fleshed out, like, but not even short stories in a good sense. Like, I've read Dubliners by James Joyce, and then some of them short stories I can still remember, and I read that book like a year and a half ago. So some of them just didn't feel complete. It's like they got going and then just ended. Whereas if they just gave them an extra 2 or 3 hours, it would have worked out so much better, but they didn't. Like, each story is 2 to 4 hours. Some of them can be beaten in like an hour and a half if you know what you're doing. So that's where I think the game fell flat mostly for me, is I didn't really care about the characters whatsoever. There were some people in their reviews said they did, and I just couldn't get behind the characters whatsoever. So that was a shame, because I think if they were given a few more hours, I might have cared about the characters, but I didn't in the end. So then, like, it's a unique premise, and it was released in 1994, so it would be even more unique back then, which is great. So I'd just like them to be a bit longer. I think they kind of had it with Octopath Traveler. Now, I never finished Octopath Traveler, but it's like they kind of had it with Octopath Traveler, but it kind of fell a bit flat for me, and I got bored. I think the combat system was ultimately what bored me. And the characters as well weren't brilliant. Like, they were very cliche. But I think if they just gave each character in Live Alive the time that they gave each character in Octopath Traveler, then I think this game would have been like really, really good, but like it's only good. So then the combat system is very interesting, especially for the time. It's like a mix between like, it's an action turn-based combat, and it's on a grid. So picture something like, almost like Fire Emblem or something, or Final Fantasy Tactics, where you have to move around the little squares. But it's action turn-based, so it's kind of like a hybrid. So you have a bar that fills up, and each movement fills up the bar a bit. But the combat system is just so easy. Like, there's just very little to it, which is a massive problem. Because now, and this kind of came to a head in the final chapter, where the combat actually became difficult, and then I realized, it was like, wow, this combat system is actually really good. But in the first 7 chapters, it's so easy. Even the bosses are easy, that like your positioning doesn't matter, what moves you use doesn't matter. Like in the Twilight of Edo Japan, I basically used the same move to kill pretty much every single enemy in that DLC, in that story. It was this phantom butterfly thing that sent out a lot of butterflies and poisoned them. But it was just killed everything, so it was pointless using anything else, which is a shame, because every character had like fucking 20 moves or 25 moves, or they had loads of cool moves, and the animations on them were really slick. But it just wasn't like incentivized to use them. So that's where the game again fell flat for me. But then on the final 2 chapters, this is going to be like spoiler free-ish. So if you don't want any spoilers for Live Alive, then skip to the next game, or to the next part. I'll leave a timestamp. But the final, when you finish the 7, you unlock an 8th character. I'm not going to say anything about the characters or anything. You unlock an 8th character, and then when you finish the 8th character, then the final chapter is how they bring all the characters together. And the final chapter, you walk around the map and you find all the main characters from all the other ones, and you can recruit them into your party. And when that happened, then all of a sudden the enemies were hard. You had to know positioning. I built like a diverse team of like a healer, a ranged kind of like magic. It wasn't magic, but like almost kind of magic. They used elemental abilities. And then, excuse me, a heavy hitting physical damage, and then kind of like a hybrid. So I had like a well-built team, and I enjoyed walking around and finding these characters, because some of them, like, you walked up there and you just found them and there they joined your party. But others you had to like do other things, like you can see Arlo playing with his Kong in the background. I hope that actually isn't too noisy on the mic, because then this whole video might actually get scrapped. But there was one, the Sundown Kid, I think his name was. He was the Wild West character. You had to like follow him around the map and find him like 5 or 6 different times to get him to recruit to your party. And then on top of that, there's these dungeons, and they're like ultimate dungeons for each character. And at the end of them, they have their ultimate weapon. So I did the Sundown Kids one. I did a few of them. I explored the map quite heavily actually. But the Sundown Kids one, you go through, and there's basically a time limit on this one. They all have their own little gimmicks. This one has like a time limit, and if you don't make it in and out in time, this like really hard boss attacks you. And fighting the boss is he's really difficult. But I had a great time fighting him. Eventually I beat him. But you can actually, I'm almost certain you could run through the dungeon without actually needing to do any, like, without having to fight him, if you just do it quick enough, if you know the way, because there's loads of different paths. And then you get his like ultimate weapon, and each person has this. So I don't understand why they can make such a strong final chapter, but the other chapters were so just average. Now they do the square final sip. They do the square the HD 2D art style, which obviously is like, come on, absolutely gorgeous. Like, it's, I don't see why Square don't just have a team that works for them, that ports Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, 4, all of them. All of the pixel, I don't know why they're doing that pixel remaster stuff. Them games look fucking ugly. They are the ugliest things in the world. I hope Arlo isn't too loud on the mic. We'll find that out. But anyway, this is very casual. This will, I actually think I'll do this every month, so it will improve as time goes on. But this is just the proof of concept, kind of. So, where was I? I was talking about the HD 2D art. So I don't know why Square don't just have a team that just remasters everything. Like feckin' Tactics Ogre, I think it's Let Us Cling Together, or that was the remake on the PSP. So this might just be a remake of Tactics Ogre, I forget. But I don't know why they don't use the HD 2D art style. I understand, look, pixel artists are very expensive nowadays. Apparently, because it's such like a niche, like obviously back in the 90s and the 80s and 90s, pixel art was the only art you could do on console. So every single artist that made games was a pixel artist. And then obviously as you went into, say, like the 2000s to 2010s, it was all 3D art. So 2D artists kind of fell to the wayside. I know 2D artists, obviously, they're still needed, but they're kind of a lot, like they're a bit more in a niche now, so they're more expensive. But I don't know why they don't make Tactics Ogre in the HD 2D art style and then just remake Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the HD 2D art style, and then they could start doing it with Dragon Quest too. It just makes no sense to me. If I was the head of Square, that's what I'd be doing, but, you know, I'm not the head of Square. So, there's probably a reason for that. But yeah, the art style is lovely. And then where this game absolutely shines is the music. The music is masterful. It's one of the best JRPG soundtracks I've ever heard. And apparently it has like a lot of inspiration from, or Undertale takes a lot of inspiration from it. So I mean, that's good. I know people like Undertale. I played it for a few hours and got bored, but like maybe one day I'll go back and play it. But yeah, you just have to listen to the soundtrack. The soundtrack is just amazing. The battle theme is brilliant. The main theme is like real epic. And then they have like, just, you know, since everything is like a different era, they have like, you know, cool like Japan style one, a cool China one. But then the coolest one is the prehistoric one. It's real like cheerful. It's like do 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 do. Do, 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 do. And it's just, I don't know. The soundtrack is brilliant. I actually need to add it to my playlist if it is on Spotify or whatever. But would I recommend this game? I wouldn't recommend this game to everybody. It's short. It's like 27 hours, which usually I'm the person that's like, I want a short game. I don't want a bloated game. But this game was too short for what it needed to be. If it was, say, 35, 40 hours and each character was given an extra bit to develop, then yeah. But the 20, like it took me 27 hours and like 9 chapters and 27 hours. It was quite short, so I do wish it was a bit longer. Like each chapter has its little gimmicks, which makes them stand out. So like the Sundown, the Wild Western one has a gimmick where you're in a town and there's bandits attacking, and you have one night to prepare. So you explore the town while there's a clock ticking down, and then you like find little bombs and stuff that you can set booby traps. But like the mechanic wasn't developed whatsoever. Like you literally use it for like 15 minutes and that's it. And then the prehistoric one has a crafting system that I used like 3 times, and that was that. And then the Twilight of Edo Japan one has an invisible thing that lets you use stealth. But again, I barely used it. I'm trying to think. The Distant Future, the Distant Future one is basically a murder mystery, and there's almost no combat. Now that one was actually pretty interesting, but that one's really short. So again, would I recommend this game? I think I would. Like it, I gave it a like on Game Explain. I'm pretty sure. I actually forget, but I'm pretty sure I gave it a liked. So I think, in my eyes, to give a game a liked, it's like I liked it. Obviously, it was grand. Like it was fine. It had a few bits that were like cool, but then other bits that kind of fell a bit flat. And I think if like you are a person that is looking for something like that, I would recommend it. But it's not a game where it's like, if you are into JRPGs, get this game. Where like if I was like right now, I'm playing Xenoblade 3, and that would be a game that I would be like, yes, every JRPG fan has to play this. So that's Live Alive. Pretty fun. It's alright. I wouldn't really recommend it. And then after that, I played Klonoa 1 and 2. And Klonoa 1 is really fun. So there's loads of cutscenes in it, first of all, which don't really like cutscenes in platformers. Platformers shouldn't have cutscenes, I don't think, in my eyes, in most cases. I know Psychonauts apparently does a lot with the narrative, but I didn't really listen because I was streaming it. So I will eventually go back to it and play it myself. So that's like the only game that I think, well, so far does cutscenes right in a 3D platform. But there's loads of cutscenes and it's all gibberish, so I mostly skipped them. But my exposure to Klonoa was, I think I played Klonoa 2 on a demo disc, or Klonoa 1. I played some Klonoa game on a demo disc on PS1 or PS2. And it was some level where you're like on a skateboard and you're going down a waterfall or something. And so Klonoa was fun. Klonoa 1 was really fun. So the main gimmick of Klonoa, it's like a 2.5D platformer kind of. There's Arlo scratching, lovely. So it's like a 2.5D platformer, and the main gimmick is that you have this slingshot or yo-yo or something. So you throw it out and then you catch the enemy, and then you hold the enemy, and then you can use that enemy as a jump. So when you jump, you can throw the enemy down and then jump off them. So that's like the main gimmick in Klonoa. And at the start, it took a while to get used to, because I don't really think of anything that I've played that was similar to that. So it took a while to get used to it, but once you get into like the final few levels, where the mechanics to collect everything kind of starts to get a bit challenging, you see how fun that mechanic can be, because there's certain parts where, you know, there'll be a collectible up here, but there's 3 enemies that you need to do. There's the Harlow jumping. So you need to like jump, get him, like attach onto him, jump, attach onto the next, jump, and it gets really difficult. Like it gets quite difficult, but quite fun. Again, the story. Arlo, come here. Oh, apologies. Arlo just wanted his con. It was stuck under my guitar. There you go. But anyway, now it's stuck under there. Okay, so Klonoa, that's where Klonoa shines. The levels are like interesting to look at, but it has that sort of, like, the graphics are fine, but it has that sort of like, that we are going to make a kind of pixely looking 3D game and we're just gonna smooth it out. You know, that sort of a look. Like, the game looks good and it looks vibrant, but there's just something just slightly off about it, where it's like that. It's like a Tactics Ogre, where you look at that and they just smooth the pixels out. I know Klonoa is a 3D game, but it's obviously quite pixely and polygonal because it is it's like an early PS1 game. So if you look at Tactics Ogre, you look at the sprites, they just got the sprites are just like, you know, smudged them a bit. And that's what it feels like they did with Klonoa, where they kind of took the original art style with the polygonal stuff, and you see all the little peaks of the triangles, and you can see they just kind of went like, we'll just rub that out a bit, we'll just squish that down. So that's the kind of vibe it gives. The colours are nice, but the graphics just don't look amazing. They're perfectly serviceable, and in some cases when the colours are nice, they look good, like great actually, but in most other cases they don't look great. So then the boss fights are cool. The boss fights are pretty cool too. They're again just Arlo, stop. No. The boss fights are pretty cool. So they're just like, they're normal 3D platformer or 2.5D platformer boss fights. Like, they're nothing really to write home about. I think, as I always say, as I said in my Balan Wonderworld video, my opinion on 3D platformer bosses is the only thing that makes a 3D platformer boss stand out is their visual design, because all of them are pretty much very easy and just like a 3D boss fight, a 3D or any platformer boss fight is they send out some projectile that you have to dodge. And in 3D games, it's usually like, a line of fire that you have to jump over. And then at the end, after they do that maybe 3 times, they get dizzy and then you have to hit them. Like that's a 3D boss fight. And the only thing that makes them stand out are their designs. Like, that's why Crash Bandicoot does it really well, because like, I think everybody can remember the bosses from Crash Bandicoot. Like, Dingo Dial has always been my favorite. He's just a cool looking character. And like, everyone will remember Engine. So in this, now that I think about it, actually, no, I'm going back on myself. I can't remember what any of the bosses look like. So yeah, there you go. I remember they look a bit weird. I think they look weird, but there you go. The boss fights, they don't look good. So don't just disregard everything I said there, because I can't remember any of them. So there you go. And then I went on to play Klonoa 2. So Klonoa 1 I really enjoyed. I almost have the platinum, but I'm only missing like 1 or 2 little collectibles, okay? So then I went on to Klonoa 2. What is he doing? Then I went on to Klonoa 2. And Klonoa 2 feels awful to play. I only played like 5 levels and I gave up. It just feels terrible. And I found out the reason for this. So basically, the remake of Klonoa 1 in this collection is a remake of the Wii remake of Klonoa 1. So that's why that kind of feels a bit smooth to play. And then the Klonoa 2 in this collection is the remake of the PS2 Klonoa 2. So that's why it feels different. So I wouldn't recommend Klonoa 2. I'd recommend Klonoa 1, but not 2. So maybe, I don't know what price, I think it's €50 for the collection. I wouldn't buy the collection for €50. I got it off Game Explain. Yeah, that's a free game code, but I did actually buy a physical myself. But, I sold it eventually, but I did buy a physical. But I wouldn't recommend getting Klonoa 2, to be honest. So, yeah, if you're getting Klonoa, wait for a sale just for Klonoa 1. You can play Klonoa 2, obviously, but I didn't really like it. And then from there, I actually have to click onto my Game Explain videos. What other games did I review? Oh yeah, so there's 4 more games that I want to talk about, so buckle in. Buckle up. Buckle something. Okay. So then I played this game called Hell Pie, which I'm going to do a review. I have a plan for a 2022 3D platformer review extravaganza. It's going to be 45 minutes long. It's going to be reviewing loads of platformers that came out this year. Hell Pie is fantastic. Hell Pie is the best indie 3D platformer I've ever played. It's better than A Hat in Time. The only thing that I will say about Hell Pie is that if you don't like grotesque aesthetics, you won't like this game. So it's very clearly inspired by Conker's Bad Fur Day, so much so that there's some levels that are like third-person shooters. So it is very much inspired by that game. And it's like 50. I've never played Conker, but I've watched loads of retrospectives and videos on it, so I know what the game looks like and stuff. Like you have the Great Mighty Pooh. Like, that's kind of grotesque, but it's not like super grotesque. But this game is proper grotesque. So the whole premise is you have to help the devil's chef to collect ingredients to make this hell pie, basically, that the devil wants. But you have to go around worlds to collect these really grotesque ingredients that are like a dead chicken, like a dead bird in a rotten egg, or like a used tampon, like this sort of like really disgusting stuff, and they're like really high detail drawings of them. So if that sort of stuff turns you off, then this game isn't for you. But I'm not big on grotesque. That's very difficult to say. I'm not very big on grotesque aesthetics. Sorry, I have to let Arlo out here. So I'm not big. So I'm not big on grotesque aesthetics, okay? And I think the reason why I like this game so much is because the mechanics are so smooth. So how Hellpie works is you're this little demon, okay? And then you get this little thing that kind of looks like Donald Trump. Maybe that might have been what they were going for, but this little like angel that is stuck to you with a chain. And the basics of the mechanics are that when you jump, I think it's R2, you press R2 and then you swing from the little Donald Trump fella off the chain. So then you have like a grapple point. And as you go through the game, when you collect collectibles, there's like a skill tree and you get more swings. So it's all about like the kind of momentum of movement, which just feels so good. Like this game feels so good to play. So like eventually I think you have 4 swings, but you'll have other moves where I think if you press L2 and R2, you swing the chain up and then you gain a bit of a height advantage. So like you can double jump, swing the chain up, and then start swinging, and the movement is just so slick. And what I was afraid about, since this was a grotesque game, I like my 3D platforms to be nice and happy. Like I loved Demon Turf, that was a great 3D platformer. But I think the worlds were a bit too dark for my liking. I would have preferred something a bit more bright. So even though this is like, you know, you're some demon from hell and you're collecting all these grotesque stuff, the worlds are still really vibrant. So the first world is like this tropical island, like it's really bright. So it's like cool having the contrast of the dark and the brightness. So even though you're this like thing that has a big Donald Trump fecker on a chain and like there's just fart jokes and blood and gore everywhere, it's still, you still have them vibrant levels that I really like from 3D platformers. And each level is like very different. Just off the top of my head, there's like, you know, there's the normal like, you know, let's explore this little tropical island and collect stuff. But then there's like a little dungeon where basically there's these poo enemies and they're like Nazis basically, and they have these like flags everywhere, and you go into their base and you infiltrate. It's real, like it's like a sewer and they're enslaving people and you have to free them. And then there's a level where you go to this restaurant, and it kind of reminds me of like Ratatouille but grotesque. But the restaurant is literally just one big vertical part, and the whole level is just reaching the top. And then what other levels are there? There's loads of, the levels are just like, they're just cool and interesting. No level feels the same. Like the final world is like is heaven, and it's really, again, it's like really bright, but it's there's grotesque stuff in it. But by the end, when there's so much movement, you have so much at your disposal, it just makes moving around so fun. Like this is easily like probably in my top 5 this year, now that I think about it. Like I've reviewed a lot of games this year, but I tell you, Hellpie could sneak into the top 5 by the end of it. So I would, if grotesque aesthetics don't suit you, then I'd probably steer clear of this game unless you like can look past it with how slick the mechanics are. But I highly recommend this game to anybody that's a 3D platformer fan. It's worth a play. It also has a cool platinum too, which is great. I haven't got it, and I probably won't, because I just move on to games because I just play so many games now. I don't really get platinums anymore. I have like 21 of them, and they're usually just platformers that I get them in. But yeah, highly recommend Hellpie. I think it's only like I bought it. I think it's 20 or 25 euro. Like it's cheap, and I think I put like 8 or 10 hours into it. But yeah, very good. Again, the boss fights are like, you know, they're boss fights. They don't really do much. The music as well, I can't really like think of any of the music. Oh, there's also this one level, there's one level that's like you're in a doctor's waiting office, and at one point, like, you have to get to the end by like robbing people's tickets, you know, like the little thing that's like, we are now serving, you know, number 10,000 or something. You have to like collect the tickets to get through the doors, or if the little coins you collect, you could just, or they're like purple orbs, but they're like the coins. You can walk up to this guy and pay him like 10,000 orbs and just skip the queue. And yeah, very fun game, would highly recommend it. So the next game after that is going to be, I believe, Stray. Stray is fun. I actually loved Stray. I think it won't click for everybody, but when it does click, it'll like, you know, it'll be a game that's like, oh yes. It's like, I've seen people review The Pathless, another game reviewed by or published by Annapurna. I've seen people review The Pathless and give it like a 7. But people either give it like a 7 or they give it like a 9 or a 9.5. That's what I think Stray is like. So like if I was to give Stray a score, it would probably be like an 8.5 or a 9. Even though I don't do scores, but like just to get that across. Where I'd say a lot of people played Stray and would give it like a 6.5 or a 7. Where like it's like the narrative well, there's not really a narrative because you're a cat, but the narrative doesn't click with you. But for me, it clicked. And the thing that got me the most was that the world building was good. Like the world building is brilliant. There's basically these little parasite zergs, one of the zerks, I think, and they were made. I assume it was almost like a place like Wall-E where everything was so like there was litter everywhere, so they had to make things to get rid of the litter. So they made these little parasites that would only eat litter, but then eventually they started eating humans, and that's how like there's only robots in the world now. There's no longer humans, and that's like interesting. I can't think of another. Usually it's like, you know, fungus killed everyone or something, but that is interesting. Like the fact that it was like engineered by some corporation to get rid of the litter in the world, and it just did that. And then the gameplay itself is quite simple, but I think it works because I think you don't want anything too fancy. Have to let her win. Like you don't want anything too fancy. Again, sorry for the casualness of this, but this is it. It's a Sunday, so I just want to take it easy. But yes, you don't want anything too fancy because, again, this is what I mean. I was listening to a podcast about this, and I agree with this point, but I didn't come up with this myself, where you don't want anything too fancy or complicated where you actually have to jump, because in this game you don't actually jump. You look at a thing and press X to jump to it. Because if you're a cat, like, cats are absolutely fascinating creatures with how good they are at jumping on things. So imagine you're playing a game as a cat and you miss a jump 6 times. Like, a cat's not going to do that. I've never ever seen a cat miss a jump. They can clear like fucking 6-foot walls from the ground. So it would feel weird if you were a cat and you miss a 2-foot jump, because no cat's ever going to miss that. So yeah, it's like, it's just a game that I think you should just experience. It's free it's on PS Plus Premium as well, which is good for anybody that has that. But it's just not a game that is worth, I don't think it's worth listening to a review for it. It's the sort of game like I'd imagine the way Journey was. I don't think it's on the same level as Journey. I've never played Journey, but I've heard people talk about it. But where like you're losing a lot by hearing someone talk about it. You should just experience it yourself. That's what I think about Stray. But I would recommend it to most people. I actually need to turn my lights down here. I just realized my forehead is very shiny. There we go. That's how it should look. Okay. So Stray, I would recommend. But if you're not into them sort of like, you know, narrative kind of chill games where you just kind of experience a world and explore, then it's not a game for you. I think it's almost like a game like Abzu, but with a bit more gameplay to it. It feels more like a game than Abzu does, but it gives off a similar vibe because there's like stealth sections and there's like chase sections where you have to, well, I think there is some of them in Abzu as well, if I remember, but there's part where the Zergs chase you and there's little puzzles and stuff. So it's definitely more of a game than the likes of Abzu, but it gives off a similar vibe to something like Abzu, and the world is just really fascinating. So that was like the standout. And then obviously the cat is cute, so I mean that probably gives it like, I'm not even a cat person, but that probably gives it like a 1 or 2 extra points on the scale. But Stray is a game that I would recommend. And then after that, was this game actually? No, the next game was Frogun, but that's going to be saved for next month, for next month's video. But I think the final game that I played, well, the final 2 games that I played this month, I could be missing something, but the final 2 games that I played this month, Devil May Cry 1, 2, and 3, great games. I'm going to do like a long video on them, so I won't spend any time talking about them. All I can say is Devil May Cry 1 and Devil May Cry 3 are some of the best games ever made. hands down. Unbelievable. Devil May Cry 2 sucks ass, but that's the end of it. I'll have a big long video about Devil May Cry, so I won't waste any time talking about that. But then after that, the final game that I played, and unfortunately I've only played 7 hours of it, which really makes me sad because I fucking love it, is Xenoblade Chronicles 3. This game is absolutely brilliant. So I love Xenoblade 1 and I love Xenoblade 2. I prefer Xenoblade 2 over Xenoblade 1, even though I'm not really into all that sort of waifu and crap, but I don't know, Xenoblade 2's combat just clicked with me more than Xenoblade 1. But, so, the thing that Xenoblade 3 does, it feels like a Xenoblade game. Straight away, it goes in, no farting around. You're not getting these boring tutorials, they're literally just menus. And within 6 hours, I've probably learned more about Xenoblade 3 than I did about Xenoblade 2 in 30 hours. Where they condense all the shit down so that you're not reading these big massive walls of text and how to do this or blah blah blah. They're not showing any of this shit. Within 6 hours, I've learned so much about the game, all the game's mechanics. Now, I'm sure there's going to be still more, but it does it so much better than Xenoblade 2 did, because Xenoblade 2, I know this is the cliche thing to say about Xenoblade, but Xenoblade 2 was fucking giving you tutorials 45 hours in, which is absolutely ridiculous. Even though I absolutely adore Xenoblade 2, but that was like the main criticism of it. So once I got into Xenoblade 3, firstly, the story gets off on the right like note. It's about these two warring factions, and there's this big flame clock thing, and everyone only has 10 years to live, and the reason why they're fighting, because if you kill someone you steal their life energy or something like that. I'm only 6 hours in, so I don't fully understand it, but that's why the two factions are like fighting each other, because they want to survive. So already it's like a really somber tone, and there's like characters in the story that, like, you know, they only have 6 months to live or something. They're like, but they've only been around for like 10 years or 20, I don't know, but it's crazy. And I think the whole journey is to kind of like figure out how to stop that, which is going to be very interesting. So they just start off on the right foot. Also, you have 6, 8, I don't know, I think you have 6 party members, and you can switch between them freely, and you can give them all different roles. So just like any other game, there's tanks, damage dealers, and healers or supports. And so each character starts off as, you know, a certain class, and once they reach level 10 in that class, they've mastered it, so they won't gain any more experience for it. So then they can change class. So it's almost like changing jobs in Final Fantasy, which is like one of the most addictive and satisfying loops in like JRPGs. So once you reach level 10, then the game teaches you, okay, this person was a DPS, but they can also change to a tank. So now, like, all my party has switched. So the main 2 tanks are now DPS, and then the main 2 DPS are tanks now, and the 2 supports swapped classes. So one support is like a healing support class, and the other one is like a buff support class, but now they're both learning it. And then once you master a class, you can gain like a master ability. And yeah, it kind of reminds me a bit of, well, again, the job system in Final Fantasy, but Strangers of Paradise Final Fantasy Origins. That's the part of that game that I really liked, where you could swap classes and master the classes. So yeah, and the world, again, just like any other Xenoblade game, the world is massive, like absolutely massive. And I just love exploring, because they make things like resource collection really easy, just like in Xenoblade 2 or M1, where they're just little like glints of light, like a little shiny thing that you walk off and you pick it up. There's no pressing A, searching, none of this. They just make it really quick, so exploring is really fun. And then there's so many different like enemies, just like all the other Xenoblade games. There's so many different types of enemies, and the combat is actually, it's like, I understand how to play Xenoblade, so it's easy-ish, but there's so much more brain that goes into fighting the smaller enemies than any other JRPG, and that's why it's constantly engaging. And then throughout the different like parts of the world, you're gonna find like a handful, maybe 3, 4, 5 different unique enemies that you can fight, and are really difficult, and you get good loot for it. So yeah, it's just, I'm only 6 hours in, but I absolutely love it, and I was just busy doing content, so I couldn't play as much as I wanted to. But I can see myself, I'm just playing 2 or 3 hours a night, hopefully, from now on, if I don't get too busy. And yeah, Xenoblade reminds me of Kingdom Hearts, where They get a lot of hate, and I can understand a lot of the hate. Like, there's plenty wrong with the games, but they just have something special about them. Like, Kingdom Hearts has so many issues. So many issues. The combat balancing is very ropey. Like, it's sometimes really easy. Other times it can get really hard all of a sudden. The stories are convoluted. Like, but there's just something magical about them. Kingdom Hearts has it. Like, an RPG where fucking Donald and Goofy are your party members, and you can have Hercules and Buzz and Woody and just all these fucking great characters, and it just makes it special. And then the music in Kingdom Hearts is unbelievable, and that's exactly what Xenoblade does. Xenoblade 2 has so many issues. The narrative is so fucking cheesy, but it's so engaging, and there's so many, like, it's real, it's like a creepy Japanese sort of narrative, which I can take a certain amount of. Eventually it gets too much, like in Neon White, that was just too much. But the way they do it in Xenoblade 2 was just hilarious. Like, when fucking, what's his name? Poppy and Tora, is that his name? The little Nopon? You know, the one, how can I be of service, master, when he turns on the robot. Like, it's so cheesy, but it's so good. All the fucking, like, the amount of, like, lines they have when they finish a battle, they all say the same fucking 3 lines for 60, 70 hours, but I don't care. And it's the same with Xenoblade 3. They just have a special sauce with Xenoblade that if you like Xenoblade, you like Xenoblade, and you understand it. Again, so many issues, but yeah, I just can't wait to play it more. I love it. I absolutely love it. And if it keeps going the way it's going, like, I think Elden Ring is probably my game of the year so far, but very well could be Xenoblade 3 by the end of it, but we'll have to wait and see when I finish it in 2 months, because I'm chipping away at it. But I think that's going to be the end of the video. Thank you for listening to my ramblings. This is like 45 minutes long. It's very casual. I will probably do this at the end of every month. I think it'll be good. I'm not expecting it to get, like, you know, views. Like, this isn't content for, you know, making, you know, really high quality content where I'm editing and adding little pictures and editing shit. I'm not even sure if I put gameplay in this. It's kind of pointless, because who's going to be fucking watching this? You're either listening to it or you're not watching it. That's basically it. So I probably won't even. I think I'll just render it and upload it. But yeah, if you have any suggestions for what I can do better next time, maybe not have Arlo in the room and have to, like, let him out to go toilet. That'll probably improve it. But yeah, I really appreciate you watching. I'd like to know what your favorite game in July is, because mine is Xenoblade. Even though I'm nowhere near completing Xenoblade, it's either Hellpie or Xenoblade. But yeah, thanks for watching. I can't imagine if you're watching this all the way to the end, you're not someone who, you might already be in the Discord, or you might follow me on Twitter, so I'm not going to ask about that. And I assume you're subscribed, because this isn't the kind of content that's going to grow a channel. So yeah, thank you. See you all in the next video. Goodbye.